Yes. The next part of our program today is a CLE entitled Stop Missing Your Life. And it's being presented by Cory, who's a best-selling author. He's a national teacher on topics of presence and well-being. He's taught mindfulness-based leadership at Columbia University, and he currently serves as an instructor of positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. And something interesting, in 2012, he spent 6 months living in silence as a monk, meditating for more than 14 hours a day. And so today, he aims to bring his teachings to people in practical and usable ways, and he's going to present to you virtually about those teachings. He's going to guide us on a journey into the heart of what is required for real change and growth, and he'll discuss the phrase, be present, and how it's become little more than a common phrase, and help us understand how we can achieve true presence. He'll also explore how we can peel back the layers of guarding that keep us from being our full, honest, and integrated selves. Cory was recently featured on our podcast here at the State Bar of New Mexico. It's called State Bar of New Mexico is Here. So be sure to check it out. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also on our website. And finally, you may have seen a book when you walked in this morning called Stop Missing Your Life. And I want to thank our book sponsor, the Bar Plan, who's allowed us to provide these books to you free of charge, as well as to the first 400 online registrants. So at this point, please help me in welcoming Cory Muscara, who will be presenting to you on Stop Missing Your Life.
Great. Thanks so much, Ben. Thanks, everyone. Really nice to be here with you. And I very much wish I could be with you in person. But I know we're getting quite used to this format as well. I'd like to share just a bit about myself as it serves as a platform for the kind of work that we're doing. And also because I was very much a skeptic when it came to this work, and you might be in that camp as well. So maybe you'll see some of your own story and mine. I think when people think of someone who teaches meditation, they immediately assume this person, must have been very spiritual, a bit of a hippie, or they came to this because they were very stressed out. My journey was slightly different. I got into meditation because I was trying to impress my college girlfriend. I wanted her to think I was cool, so I started meditating because she was into meditation, and it didn't work. She broke up with me a couple weeks after that. But there was a different happy ending in that, which was that the pain of that breakup is the thing that actually caused me to take this practice more seriously. And, if you've been through something difficult in your life, right? A college breakup isn't the most difficult thing, but it is a form of pain. You probably can resonate with this idea of that is often when we start seeking answers, how can I relieve this suffering? How can I relieve this pain? And so this superficial undertaking of I'm going to meditate to impress someone quickly turned into a very genuine inquiry into how can I relieve this internal struggle and stress that I'm going through. Because I actually felt tormented. My mind was all over the place. I was stuck in remorse and caught up in all these things of what's wrong with me? What could I have done differently? And all this negative rumination about the future. And so I made this commitment that I was going to meditate, 3 times a week for 15 minutes. Didn't really know what I was doing, but I'd lie on my dorm room bed. I'd put up my hands on my belly, and I would just think to myself, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And it was this very basic practice of just, focusing on the breath over and over. But within a short period of time, some cool things started to happen. My sleep improved radically. I always had very restless sleep up until that point, would wake up 15 to 20 times a night, was taking sleep meds but didn't like them. They made me groggy. Started doing the meditation, and within about a week, I went from waking up 20 times a night to only a couple times a night. That really piqued my interest. I noticed I developed this thing called paying attention. I had an ADD mind. It was very hard for me to be present, very hard for me to focus in class. And started within a couple of weeks of the meditation, there was this new ability to actually follow a thread of conversation. And if I wanted to direct my attention I was much better able to catch myself when my mind was going off. And that's often the issue with focusing. It's not that we can't focus, it's often that we're not aware of when we're not focused. So there was just this new capacity of, oh, there goes the mind, bringing it back. That was very compelling. The third thing that most sparked my interest and really has led to this journey for me was that I found myself walking around at that time on campus, doing the same things that I always was, but there was this new sense of lightness in myself. There was, that I'd smile more. There was a sense of ease, a sense of groundedness. I felt like I was in my body and not just going through the motions of my life. And that really piqued my interest because up until that point, I think much of how I was pursuing my well-being was essentially arranging all the puzzle pieces of my life so that the picture looked good. The puzzle piece of the relationship, family. At that time, like what was important was like grades and a job, and just like when all of that would come together, then I could relax. Then I could be at ease, and I could, then I was okay. And what I was already becoming disillusioned with was that whole pursuit of well-being, because there were times where I would get that like dream vision, and then I was happy for like a day, and then it was like, okay, what's next? And so here I was finding that there was this new well of fulfillment that was developing organically, that really wasn't contingent upon manipulating those external variables. And that was powerful. This was coupled with a trip to the New York Stock Exchange, because I was going into finance at that time. And we met with this, billionaire hedge fund manager, and he gave a presentation, and it just sucked my soul right out of my body. And nothing against finance, and nothing against this guy. He could have had a colonoscopy before he came in the room having a bad day. But there's something about him and the way he seemed to be presenting himself that just made me question, like, I know for sure I do not want to end up like this guy. And if not, then what is it that I'm most interested in? And the answer that kept coming back was like wanting to be happy, wanting to be fulfilled, and a real ignorance around what that meant. So my dad was a physician. He wanted nothing to do with like
Muted.
anything that
Muted.
hippie-ish or unscientific. And so you can imagine coming home saying like, hey, Dad, I know I was going to go into business, but now I want to study happiness and get into meditation. Usually that would be met with like, okay, that's cute, but go get a job. And instead, it was met with open arms. And he said, actually, there's a lot of science supporting this. And he had been doing some self-study for his own exploration of how to cultivate well-being for his patients, and his own inquiries into stress reduction. And he said, if that's something you
Unmuted.
can, and you can do it through an academic lens. And
Muted.
it's really how this journey began for me. The initial interest was the science of mindfulness, the science of meditation, and
Unmuted.
articles, and I gobbled all of it up. And my type A personality was, I was meditating 15 minutes a day, and it was going really well. And I was, stress reducing, the stress reduction, better sleep. And a year later,
Muted.
it says, all right, you're doing this 15 minutes a day. It's going well. Like, what would happen if you did 15 hours a day? That's where my mind goes with everything. And so that's what I did. I went over to Southeast Asia and lived in Burma for 6.5 months as a monk, where we were meditating a minimum of 14 hours a day, sometimes up to 18, 19 hours a day, sleeping only a few hours a night on a very thin mattress, 2 meals a day. The last one ends at 11 a.m. And just a heck of a lot of meditation. And it was quite powerful to see how you can train the mind to get to some profound states of peace, equanimity, and well-being. It completely transformed my relationship to myself. My inner critic that I used to have very strongly really doesn't exist anymore. And I just came back with this new intentionality in my life. And I also saw quickly that it's one thing to cultivate well-being in a monastic setting where there are no kids, distractions, or money struggles. It's another thing to do it in the real world. And that's been what my journey is and what I aim to teach. And so what I'd like to explore here today with you is just what is this mindfulness thing that seems to be going around and has a lot of buzz right now? Why might it be worth cultivating for you? What's some of the science supporting it that's quite interesting, especially the neuroscience? How to meditate. So we will do some meditation. Some people, at this point go like, cool, like really want to meditate. Others are going like, that's when I'm going to go to the bathroom. So just see if you could stay for that, because that's really the heart of this. And then I want to share just some basic practices you can use to reduce stress in the moment. I have no grand ideas that you're all going to go off and, establish a 30-minute a day meditation practice. And it's great if you do, but I do want to make sure you have some resources for like in the moment ways to reground yourself. Those are the things we tend to come back to the most. I would like to start with a basic exercise that involves these bells. And sometimes I bring these bells out and people look at them, all these ideas come up and go, I don't know if this is what I signed up for. I know they can look a little out there, but the main reason I bring them is because they make very pleasant ringing sound. So what I'd like to do is just make this an exercise. I'm going to ring them a few times, and each time I do, see if you can follow the sound of the bell from the moment it begins all the way until it dissolves into silence. Sometimes the audio can muffle the bell prematurely, so if it does go into silence seemingly early, you can just listen to the sound of silence and just be with that space and notice maybe the tendency to jump out of silence, or it's like, oh, I'm kind of scared to be with my mind. It's just an opportunity to be in nothingness, and how seldom an opportunity that really is. So let's try this out. If you'd like to close your eyes, you're welcome to. You're also welcome to keep them open. And I'll ring them 3 times. So if your eyes are closed, you're welcome to open them again. So, about a minute there. And, different things can arise when we tune into this. One of the things we can feel or sense is like, oh, you know what? By paying attention to the bell, I actually noticed other sounds around me that I wasn't aware of before. Maybe the ticking of a clock or the sound of your neighbor breathing. Other times we feel like, I was actually a little more sensitized to the duration of the bell by the 3rd time, which is interesting because we didn't really do much here, but just the intention of paying attention, we start to notice more details of our experience. And on one hand, you could say, it's like, all right, big whoop, don't really care about listening to bells in my life. I get it. On the other hand, like, what would it be like to bring that quality of paying attention to conversation with your partner, having a good meal, or even just waking up in the morning, feeling yourself breathing? It's like, wow, the gift of another day of being alive. Very easy to pass through the motions without being attentive to detail in that way. Another thing people tend to experience is like, I actually felt a little bit of peace in that. There was a quality of groundedness, especially after the 3rd bell, where just felt like I was a little bit more calmer. My mind was a little more centered. And that's an interesting one to me that I think is worth us following for a moment. Like, what might be going on there? We could say that these are magical bells and they're transmitting energy and calming your being. Possible. But I think there's something about the way we were paying attention that actually has an effect on the whole system. When we think about the mind and thoughts in the mind, I mean, how often is our mind going from one place to another without us actually asking it to? Caught up in thoughts about the future, what is to come, caught up in thoughts about the past. Why'd that person make that face at me? I shouldn't have done that thing. Did I make that right decision in that relationship a year ago? And then all the judgments we have about this present moment. It's like, I can't believe I'm listening to a presentation on meditation. Do I like this? Do I trust this guy? All of that becomes kind of the noise of our mind. It's very normal and it's very useful. Thinking about the future is incredibly important. Reflecting on the past helps us not make mistakes. And having judgments in the present moment helps us discern, like, is this safe or not? And do I want to put my time here or not? So big fan of how the mind operates. But a lot of times it's doing that without us being aware of it. There's no intentionality behind it. And when we're not aware of that stream of thought, it's just sweeping us around wherever it wants to take us. And this is how we'll repeat the same patterns in our lives, get the same emotional output, and really feel, in some sense, prisoners of our own mind. And so there's something about, like, just tuning into the bells where it's not like all of that disappears. That could have been your experience. But often it's we're directing our attention intentionally so that that is not the predominant narrative in our mind. And when that does kind of fall away to the wayside, there is a little bit more ease that organically arises in our system. And this is the beginning of learning to be more intentional with how you direct your life moment by moment by moment. And it makes me think of this quote that's often attributed to Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, where it says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And then in our response lies our growth, our freedom, and our happiness. If I can encapsulate, in one sentence, what it is we're really trying to do with this work, it's learning how to see that space between stimulus and response, and then inhabit that space. Because it's only in that space that you can lead your life with any sort of intentionality, purpose, and alignment with the person you want to become, and also break any habits that seem to be running on automatic pilot. The opposite is living your life on automatic pilot, and it is very easy to go through the motions, the same thoughts, the same emotions, the same behaviors, for not just days and weeks, but years and decades and a lifetime. And I see it over and over and over again with the people I work with. So on some level, you could say, like, what we're exploring here is basically the practice of waking up to this moment of our life. And it's the only moment we ever have. And the best practice that I have found to do that is mindfulness and meditation, which I have no commitment to, for the record. If I find something else that helps me live a good life, a more intentional life, I'll drop this in a heartbeat. But in my exploration and through the science of well-being, like, this seems to be foundational for, at the very least, cultivating a baseline level of self-awareness that allows us to lead our lives with some sort of direction. Mindfulness is not just this thing that I'm coming in and saying, like, hey, you should try this. It worked for me. There's a lot of science supporting it, and it has been just creeping up through the floorboards of organizations, of education, of healthcare. It's really exciting. I have a lot of theories about why that's going on. One is the science, but I think the other thing has a lot to do with this thing. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these. This is called a smartphone. You might have some other version of it. It's great. Love this thing. Use Waze all the time. GPS takes me through people's backyards, gets me there, 30 seconds faster. A lot of cool benefits to having this. And there was also research that came out recently at MIT by Sherry Turkle that shows if you go on a date with someone, or just like you're out having dinner and this is on the table, even if it's turned off upside down and doesn't go off once, the mere presence of it in the conversation actually prevents the conversation from going to deeper, more substantial levels. So there's something about this thing that is connecting us in a big way and also seems to be disconnecting us from other people, but also from ourselves. Because what this has made incredibly easy is that any bit of discomfort that we might be feeling, any bit of stress, worry, confusion, what should I do with my life, we can just pick this thing up and go on TikTok for 30 minutes and kind of forget about it. And it's not like those confusions or stressors go away. They just sort of get put in the backpack of life, stored in the background, and that backpack gets heavier and heavier and heavier until one day it's just like, I don't know what's going on. Things in my life seem objectively good, and yet I feel this heaviness, or I feel miserable, or I'm like really disconnected in my relationships. these things don't happen out of nowhere. There are lots of signs along the way that lead to the accumulation of this, and if we're not paying attention, it will creep up on us in a really significant way. So, in service of what we're going to do next, which is our meditation, a short meditation, if you do have your phone with you, you might just put it aside. I can't see what you're doing, so there's no policing you here. But for your own interests in this practice, and in service of kind of like the space we're creating, it might be cool to see like what happens if we just put this aside for a few moments and take an opportunity to drop in together into a certain kind of presence that we might not typically get to touch. I'm going to guide you through a practice. There's nothing you need to know beforehand. I won't be hypnotizing you. You'll have full control over your mind. You don't need to sit in any special cross-legged position. Just find something that feels good for your body. I'm sitting in a chair, so I'm just going to kind of like lean back a little bit because that feels good for me. And you might have noticed I close my eyes naturally. If that feels good to you, you can close your eyes. So a lot of the things we see around meditation often has the eyes closed, but you don't have to. It's okay to keep the eyes open, and they could be resting at a point on the ground or in front of you. So that's fine too. But if you'd like to close your eyes, you can do so. And let's start by taking a deep breath together. Breathing in through the nose and slowly out through the mouth. Inviting the jaw to soften. The teeth don't need to be clenched right now. Inviting the shoulders to be at ease. Noticing if they're holding any tension. And also inviting the hands and the belly to relax. And notice how this is an invitation to relax, to soften. You can't force the body to relax. That sometimes there's just really deep-seated tension. And so we might create extra tension for ourselves trying to relax. It's like when someone tells you to relax when you're really mad. It's like, yeah, that's not going to work. So we're just making an invitation, any area of the body that is able to relax, that may be holding tension out of habit, invite that to soften, maybe in the face, chest, feet, the legs. Just feeling for a moment what it's like to not be doing anything. This time has already been allocated for you. If I came in and forced this presentation on you while you were in the middle of your workday, it'd be a good argument to say, like, hey, I have other things to focus on. But you're already here. And because of that, in this moment, there's no place else you need to be. Nothing else you need to be doing, and no problems you need to solve. So see if you can actually give yourself the permission to be here in this moment, however it is, without needing to get someplace else, or maybe even feeling guilty for taking this time for you. It was Parker Palmer who said, self-care is not selfish. It's simply good stewardship of the only gift we have, ourselves, the gift we were put on this earth to offer others. Anytime we take care of ourselves, we do it not just for ourselves, but for the many others whose lives we aim to serve and care about. So when we're talking about mindfulness, we're talking about a certain quality of presence and awareness of our moment-to-moment experience. So you may start by just simply noticing anything that you can hear if hearing is a capacity for you. There's the more obvious sound of my voice, but in the moments when I'm quiet, you may notice other sounds in the space around you. And these don't have to be distractions. Even if it's your child yelling in the back room, this is what makes your present moment experience. They're not an obstacle to presence. So instead of seeing them as a distraction or an interruption, just notice, what is it like to hear? The experience of hearing or the experience of silence. This same quality of listening and noticing, we can also direct to our thoughts. Now, you might think meditation's about clearing the mind of thoughts. Let's try a different orientation. Instead of trying to clear the mind of thoughts, just notice, what is it like to watch your mind thinking? Almost as if you were laying in the grass, watching clouds pass through the sky. Just a thought. Just a cloud. What is it like to be an observer of your thinking rather than caught in your thinking, no matter what the thoughts are? It's not, or it's less you thinking and more you watching the activity of the mind. And lastly, let's just bring our attention to the fact that we're breathing. That you're breathing. If you'd like to place your hand on your abdomen to feel the breath more vividly, you're welcome to do that too. And you don't need to breathe in any particular way. You don't even need to try to deepen the breath. You're just noticing that, oh, this body is breathing you right now. And it's been breathing you, whether you were aware of it or not. And as long as you're breathing, there's much more right with you than wrong with you. Feeling the air as it moves in through the nostrils or the mouth, filling up the lungs, expanding the belly, the chest, and just feeling the body deflate on an exhale. If the mind wanders off, you just notice that. You don't have to beat yourself up over it. All that will do is create more tension. Just, oh, there goes the mind. And bringing it back. Just this breath, just this moment. Let's take one more deep breath together, in through the nose, slowly out through the mouth. And when you're ready, you can let your eyes open again. Okay, great. So it was about a 10-minute practice that we just did there, 10, 11 minutes, which is a nice time to practice, especially if you're new to this. And also, 10 minutes is a lot, but also not that much. I mean, think of all the ways that we can easily waste 10 minutes throughout the day. And just notice what you're feeling right now. So many different things can come up when we meditate. Sometimes we do feel more grounded, more peaceful, more in our bodies. My voice gets a little deeper after I meditate. You may notice that as well. So that may be your experience. Sometimes we actually raise awareness around some things in our experience that maybe we were trying not to look at. Some pain that might be there, some grief that's lingering beneath the surface, some confusion about something in our life that we've created a bit of an addiction to busyness to avoid. That's common. Many of us distract ourselves to float above the pain that's lingering in the shadowy depths of our being, to try and sound poetic with it. So that's normal. And I'm not saying we have to open the floodgates to all of that, but just to acknowledge that there are a lot of ways that we build these defenses as humans to get through the confusion of it and the pain of it. And those are good. It's good to be able to have those. It's good to be able to compartmentalize and even suppress if you need to. But to make that a long-term strategy comes with consequences. And we just disconnect more and more from ourselves. So we can see this as a process of like descending back into ourselves, into the fullness of ourselves, so that we're not just operating from the buzzing nature of our mind that's saying next goal, next goal, next goal, next goal, next goal. Goals are great. But if they're just driven by fear and anxiety and being terrified of like being still enough to feel into what do I actually want in my life, then that's problematic, because then they're not really our goals or someone else's goals, or they're fear-based goals. Something that happens where we like get in touch with ourselves, where we could go, what do I actually want? Like, who am I? How do I want to be living my life? What's the motivation behind what I'm doing right now? And the cool thing there is like, there's so many things that can motivate us from a really good place, a fulfilling place: excitement, energy, desire for growth, compassion, care. And in my experience, like, kind of like you first have to get in touch with yourself to operate from that place, rather than just operating from scripts in the mind. So, this whole meditation thing, this to me is one of the direct paths to cultivating more mindfulness. We haven't really defined mindfulness yet. And I do that intentionally because I want you to have more of an experiential sense of it before I start putting words on it. But now that we have meditated, let's look at what one of the definitions of mindfulness is. This is by John Kabat-Zinn. He says it's the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So see how that resonates for you. You're kind of doing it right now, right? There's a paying attention on me. Or maybe you're looking at your phone instead. No judgment. But let's say, maybe just take a moment. Like, place your attention on me for a moment. Right? Okay, so you're paying attention. You did it deliberately. It's like there's an intentionality behind it, on purpose. It's in the present moment. This moment is only happening here. The experience of me and you is only right now. It's not the future. It's not the past. It's right here. Then non-judgmentally. That's an interesting one. Because that's where it's like, wait, aren't judgments important? And, we're so used to having judgments that we almost like attach them tightly. It's like, I'm not going to let go of my judgments. And even, what would that even look like? And so let's first start by acknowledging that judgments are incredibly important. They help us be safe. Like, if you walk in the street and there's a car coming, I want your mind to say, this is bad, get out of the way. I do not want you saying, well, I just attended this mindfulness event, and then you talked about non-judgment. Let me see if I could be with this experience. No, you're going to get hit by a car. It's going to hurt. So we're not trying to lose our discernment. We're trying to see how the discerning mind often uses us and takes us down these rabbit holes of judgments, of like pushing something away or grasping onto something without us even realizing it. And you can be holding all these judgments, like, well, just take it in the context of me right now. Like you're paying attention to me. There's a certain kind of presence, but maybe all these judgments you have about me. This guy's too young to teach about meditation, or like a certain kind of look I have might remind you of someone else that triggers something in your body. Maybe I'm talking too slowly or too deeply or too much in a meditative voice. And like all of that can arise. And I'm not saying any of it's bad. Like it's yours and you can use it. I think it's just important that we're aware of it. Otherwise, like, let's say there is something useful here, but the judgment arises like, this isn't for me, but it's based more on like me, the judgment's about me or something. Like it could actually take us away from something that may be useful for us. And there are an infinite number of examples of like how judgments show up in our life in that way, push us away from something where actually it might just be conditioning in our mind that's saying this is bad. So what non-judgment is pointing to in mindfulness is not that you're not going to have judgments, but it's pointing to the recognition that there's going to be a lot of experiences that show up in your human condition. Thoughts, emotions, sensations. And if you're going into this thinking like you're going to have rainbows and unicorns experiences, and it's just like, oh, now that I just closed my eyes for the first time, and I'm doing a meditation, that like you're just supposed to bliss out, you're already setting yourself up for misery and frustration, because it's just all you're doing is like dropping into your experience more intimately. And that can be pleasant when we're not caught up so much in the noise of our mind. But often what we are going to see is like, whoa, there's a ton of stuff here that is scary to look at and I don't want to be with. And like, why is my mind all over the place? And I am judging all over the place. And I do have some discomfort. And there is this pain in my shoulder. Maybe I should have like gone to PT 5 years ago, but I was too stubborn to do that. Right? Like all of these things can just condition more judgment. And the non-judgment is just saying like, hey, just pause. Like, it's complicated. You're doing your best. Let's just see if we can be with this moment as it is without adding more suffering through all of our ways of relating to ourselves and our experience by saying, what's wrong with me? I'm no good. I'm an idiot. Should have done it differently. Whew. Life is hard enough. It does not need your commentary in that way. So that's the invitation in meditation, and that's the invitation in mindfulness. It's not saying you don't judge what you see outside of you. I mean, this is how change happens. It's like you see something, you say, I don't like that. I want to do something in relationship to that. Cool. Good. Like, let's first just acknowledge the judgments that are arising, and that they're coming from a place that's aligned with your heart, and then take action in relationship to it. Non-judgment in your internal experience. If you could judge yourself into happiness or well-being, then like, great, go for it. It just doesn't work that way. And trying to judge yourself or berate yourself into positive change also like can temporarily work. It's like, I hate myself, so I'm going to exercise a lot more. That can actually create some motivation. But what ends up happening is you completely disconnect from yourself in the process. You condition a lot of internal self-hate, and you create a certain experience of yourself that is now necessary to maintain in order for there to be some quality of self-love or peace in your life. And anything that compromises it just like compromises your self-concept. So it's just like a very fragile form of well-being, and not one that I'm interested in and don't think is sustainable or even interesting. Fortunately, there's just a lot of science to support all this mindfulness stuff. There were over 1,000 articles that came out just last year alone on the benefits of meditation. What we see consistently is if you do a practice of about 8 to 10 minutes a day, even less, but like the latest research I've seen is about 8 minutes a day starts to get some neurological changes. If you do that, you're going to see reductions in stress, anxiety, depression, relapse in depression that's as good, if not better, than medication. You're going to see improvements in things like joy, overall positive emotion, gratitude, dispositional mindfulness and presence, so just the capacity to be aware, better listening skills, associations with longevity of life, which we're not totally sure why that happens yet, but you see when people go through an 8-week mindfulness course where they're meditating like 20 to 30 minutes a day, the telomeres, which are responsible for lifespan, like little shoelaces on shoelace tips on the end of your DNA, the rate of deterioration of the telomere is associated with lifespan, and you actually slow down the rate of deterioration by going through a mindfulness course like that. And they test that at 6 months and a year-long follow-up and see that. So some really interesting relationships to longevity. I've been particularly interested in the neuroscience because we do see that the brain change. This isn't a real brain. This is Play-Doh from Toys R Us. Rest in peace, Toys R Us. We see that the brain changes. Neuroplasticity, newer phenomenon that we're learning about. The brain changes in response to different experiences. But what we see with meditation is when people engage in a practice, areas of the brain responsible for stress, anxiety, rumination, worry, these areas start to shrink. And then the areas responsible for empathy, for joy, for focus, for buffering against cognitive decline, these areas actually start to grow in physical structure. So we can view this very simply as a form of mental fitness. In the same way that there's, like a gym on every street corner, we all know where to go to exercise our bodies. Where do you really go to exercise your brain? Some of that is now emerging in different circles, like we're learning more about that, but it wasn't something I was taught when I was growing up. And trust me, I had a lot of teachers say, Cory, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. Not one of them taught me how to pay attention. And the interesting thing about that short anecdote is I went and gave a talk to my high school alma mater a couple of years ago, and it was like a ton of the same teachers who taught me when I was there. And it was that long talk, and they can't pay attention for anything. So this is like a pandemic of attention, and it's something that we can train. Interestingly, it's really cool. And so if you think about it, just in like the meditation that we did, let's take the end of it where we were just focusing on the breath. The mind wanders. We practice bringing it back to the breath. The mind wanders. We bring it back to the breath. The mind wanders. Bring it back to the breath. Well, that bringing back is very much like a bicep curl. And so you can think of this like a bicep curl for the brain, right? The weight of the world pulls us away. The weight of the mind pulls us away. We bring it back. The weight of the dumbbell pulls down. We bring it back up. And the more you do that over time, the stronger that capacity gets. And so if that's a helpful way to think about this meditation, especially if you're like wanting to integrate it into your day, just as a form of mental fitness, it is a nice way to think about it. 3 to 5 minutes in the morning, if you want to do it just in silence, like I'm just going to focus on my breath. It's my way of training presence. It's my way of observing all the way the mind is pulling me around, and I'm just going to bring it back here, bring it back here, bring it back here. And you got to do it with some ease. I mean, you really got to do it with some ease. And playfulness, because if you're taking yourself too seriously, or you like take your same like gym discipline and try to bring it to meditation, I mean, you're just going to condition. You're going to reinforce the same conditioning that's probably causing you to want to meditate in the first place. The conditioning that says like, I'm going to be the best at this. Nobody's going to be as peaceful as me. Like, I'm going to be enlightened after 10 sessions. Like that mentality that's maybe served you well in other areas of your life is just going to exhaust you in meditation because the mind's all over the place. And so it's just much better to think about it as like training a puppy dog, right? The mind like a puppy dog. So when you're trying to train a puppy to sit, you ask it to sit. What does it do? Runs in the other room, doesn't want anything to do with you. Say, okay, come on, puppy, come back. And then when it does finally sit, you give it a treat and you go, oh, you're the best puppy ever. I love you so much. You're so wonderful. And you just praise it. We want to take the same relationship with the mind. When the mind wanders off, we go, hey, Cory, remember, we're focusing on the breath. And the mind goes, oh, yeah. It comes back to the breath for like 2 seconds and wanders off again. Hey, remember what we're doing? Neuroplasticity, that's important. All right, back to the breath. Good. And then when it comes back to the breath, you go, oh, good mind. Good, Cory. You're doing such a good job. And obviously, you don't have to do that. I'm being slightly facetious. But it's that playful relationship that we want to take with our mind that's really important for actually developing some sort of sustainable practice and a quality of ease in our being. Like, do you feel the difference between that way of relating with yourself versus like, come on, we got 10 minutes. We got to get the most out of this 10 minutes. Do it right. It's like, I already feel tense even doing that. And so play around with it. None of it you have to take at face value. Like, try that mentality and see how it feels internally. But chances are, if that's your default mentality, it's probably showing up in a lot of other areas of your life, and it's probably creating a lot more stress than you realize. And this is an opportunity for you to just like rest in a little bit more ease within yourself. So let's just talk about this in the context of stress in a very practical way. One of the definitions we have for stress is when our perceived demands are greater than our perceived resources to meet those demands. Perceived demands greater than perceived resources. What's the key word there? perceived. Why? Well, often what we perceive to be demanding is very different than what is actually demanding. So let's take an example of you're in the shower. When you're in the shower in the morning, are you actually in the shower? Okay, lost you there, Cory. Yeah, I have no doubt that your physical body is in the shower, but is your mind in the shower with you as well? Probably not. We're in the shower, but we're not. We're already driving to work. We're already taking care of the kids. We're already preparing breakfast. We're already planning our retirement. We're already mad that we can't retire when we want to retire. Like, all these thoughts are in the shower with us. So here we are in the shower, but we're also like, got to take care of the kids, got to get to work, got to get on that Zoom call pretty quickly. Who has the resources to do all of that in any given moment? No one. But the brain is not very good at distinguishing the difference between the reality of those things and the thoughts about those things when you're lost in them. However, you bring your attention to what are you doing right then, just like, oh, I'm just in the shower, just rubbing soap on my body, shampooing my hair. Most of us have the resources to be able to meet those demands. And you could take this same principle into like the actual stress of your day. It's like it's Monday morning, you got a ton of emails to take care of, 100, they all need your attention by 5 p.m. When you sit down and do that first email, are you just doing that first email, or are you also feeling like the heaviness of, oh, I have 99 other emails to take care of, cursing out email, cursing out the person that invented email, life was so much better before we had email. But like, now you're holding the weight of 100 emails, when in reality, all you're doing is just one email. And not just one email, it's just one sentence, and not just one sentence, it's just one word. And that's not Pollyanna, that's not putting on rose-colored glasses, that's not like positive thinking or overriding the reality of the experience. It's dropping into the reality of the experience. And that's the beauty of this practice, is that like, it's more about having an honest conversation with reality than sugarcoating it or pretending like something's not there. And often what our minds tend to do is just catastrophize. We bring in so much extra stuff that's going to happen in the future or happen in the past into this moment. When if you look at most moments of your day, every moment of your day, it's going to look like some combination of what's happening right now. It's like I'm sitting, I'm listening, I'm sitting, I'm talking, sitting, I'm driving, standing, I'm walking. You drop into like, what is actually here right now? Usually what you'll see is that this moment is a little less of a catastrophe than the mind is making it out to be. And that's one of the ways that mindfulness just interacts with stress. It reduces our perceived demands to what is actually demanding right now. And it simultaneously expands our perceived resources to hold what is arising. When you're caught in thoughts and caught in your emotions, like, you have very little bandwidth. There's a lot of constriction there. But, in the meditation, as you saw, right, there's an openness. Like, oh, they're thoughts. I can watch my thoughts rather than being caught in my thoughts. That's a massive internal resource to be able, like, in a stressful situation, to go, oh, look at what my mind's thinking about. Oh, it's really caught up about this. Is that true right now? What else can I turn my attention to? Those are internal resources that help you navigate high demanding situations. So the cool thing about mindfulness, right? We have the definition of stress, perceived demands greater than perceived resources. Well, we're shrinking those demands and increasing our resources. We basically just like flip this model on its head. And it's one of the reasons why when you see people who have engaged in a meditation practice or really building mindfulness principles in their lives, there is a certain groundedness in their being. So I want to give you a few simple practices you can utilize before we go into questions that you could view them as like relaxation techniques, but they're mindfulness practices that just help ground you back into the present moment. The first is a simple exercise called Take 5 that we could do together. So it involves taking out your left hand like this and holding it in front of you like you're holding a pizza pie, and then your right pointer finger and placing it in the palm right around the wrist. I'll hold my hand up like this. And so what we're going to do is slide the pointer finger up the thumb, and as we do, breathe in through the nose. So sliding up, breathing in. Slide back down, exhale through the mouth. Up the pointer finger, inhale. Back down. Middle finger, inhale. Back down. Ring. Back down. Pinky. Back down. Cool. So that's Take 5. Really simple. It doesn't take more than about 25 seconds. There's something about the tactile nature of this that seems to be really settling and grounding to the system. Some people see this and go, that seems like a kid's exercise. Well, it is a kid's exercise. Kids love it. So if you do have kids, feel free to teach it to them. But yeah, I was teaching it to kids, and then I had a friend. She was like, let's teach it to adults. So we started teaching it to our adults, our students at Columbia, and they were really into it. And then I started teaching it to my public groups, and they were really into it. And then we're like, am I going to be bold enough to go into corporations and tell executives to pet their pinkies every time they're stressed out? Did that and had the CEO get back to me. He was like, Cory, all that meditation stuff, that's great. But I gotta say, that Take 5 thing, that's phenomenal. I love it. So there's something about it that's really practical, really easy to integrate into your life. And it's one of the things that sticks for people. So try it out. You can do it first thing in the morning. You do it when you're feeling stressed. It's more than anything, like you're feeling the tactile nature of what's here right now. You're aligning it with your breath, and it's a simple way to ground the nervous system. Another simple way to do that is a cognitive hack called shifting your what ifs to what is. What if to what is. So what ifs just represent all the what ifs of your mind. What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? What if they don't like me? What if I fail? What if I can't get it all done? Right? What if, what if, what if? Sometimes the what if mind can be useful. It can help motivate us. It can help us prepare for the future. A lot of times it's just creating extra stress in an unconscious way. So when you find yourself caught up in the what if mind and you don't think it's useful, then drop into what is here. You could do it right now. Like for me, I feel my feet on the ground, see the screen, there's a roof over my head, feel the temperature in my body's relatively cool. I don't feel too hungry. So when I drop into like what is here, it's different than the thought about my mind. I'm like, next presentation after this, other thing to come later in the day, things that I'm navigating, all of that. I could easily work myself up into a frenzy when I like bring that all into the present moment. And sometimes that's good. It's like, all right, let's create a to-do list and figure out when we're going to do this. But when it comes to actually doing it, it's actually not serving me. It's disconnecting me from the thing that I actually want to work on. So simple cognitive hack, shifting what if to what is. Next is a breathing technique that I love for helping to lower the heart rate, especially before sleep, but also really good for any time you're feeling stressed out. It's a 4-7-8 breath. So you breathe in for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. So let's do it together. Breathing in for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cool. Holding for 7 can sometimes be hard. Exhaling for 8 can usually be hard. And to do this, it can be helpful to imagine that you're blowing hot air on a cold window like this, and then close the lips like this. And that'll constrict the airways, allowing you to elongate the exhale. So a simple practice you could do there. 4-7-8 breath. And then the last thing is just interpersonal. Can we listen to understand rather than listening to respond? Listen to understand rather than listen to respond. This is a complicated one, I think, especially in the context for lawyers, where so much of the listening is like, okay, when are they going to say the thing that I've prepared to say my thing in response, and like thinking so many steps ahead. And so like I want to acknowledge the value of that. And I'm not going to be the one to say like how to do what you do. You know what to do. What I am going to offer is an awareness of how maybe listening to respond might be showing up in your life in a negative way. Is it showing up in relationships, outside of work? Is it showing up in work in a way that's not serving you? And what would it be like to really make the intention to first understand deeply what this person is saying, and then trust that the response will arise organically, rather than prematurely being caught up in scripts about what I should say, or quickly getting defensive because the person said something that triggered something. It's like, wait, no, I didn't mean that. I meant this. It's like, what if we were to just listen to the person, understand where they were coming from, what they were experiencing, and then allow our response to come from there? Listen, understand, not respond. Okay, so those are 4 simple practices. Take 5, shifting what if to what is, 4-7-8 breath, listening to understand, not respond. I have a bunch of teachings as well, like simple teachings like this on Instagram, which you can find me just at Cory Muscara, CoryMuscara. If you want more stuff like this. Brianna is also going to put a link in the chat if you want to get daily text messages for free that also have short teachings like this and short insights that go out each day. I just want to make sure you're like supported if you want to keep going into this. And all my meditations are on mindfulness.com. But let's go into some questions before we go. We have a few minutes, so I'll stop here and wait for some questions to come in.
Okay, Cory. How does meditation compare with traditional therapy techniques in dealing with stress in your experience?
Yeah, so it's a big question because there's so many different therapy techniques. You know, you have CBT, you have DBT, you have trauma-related therapies like EMDR, somatic experiencing, and they all have their place. And especially if you're going through some trauma, it's really good to work with a trained therapist. I think mindfulness is extremely complementary, and I often, this is just my anecdotal experience, I get a lot of students who say, I went through 10, 20 years of therapy and nothing has had the impact that mindfulness and meditation has. And one of the reasons I think that's true, that can be true for a lot of people, is a lot of people can get lost in their thoughts in therapy, especially if you're like just doing cognitive behavioral therapy or just doing talk therapy, which have value. They can be a bit circular, and it's just like, yeah, I know I need to do this, or I know I need a different perspective, or I know I need to shift. Whereas meditation like installs that new way of seeing yourself and understanding yourself. And it's also saying like, you don't actually have to change your thoughts. Let's instead identify and connect to the part of you that's big enough and separate from your thoughts to be able to hold thoughts and just watch them as like fleeting experience and transient experience in your awareness. That's a very different relationship to like, let me go in there and manipulate the thought to get a different experience. Which is also useful. So I see mindfulness and meditation as like practices that install so many of the learnings that are often aimed to be accomplished within psychotherapy and other forms of therapy. Anything else?
I think that's it. I think we are at time.
Cool. Well, everyone, it was a real joy to be here.
Unmuted.
And you know, there's so many ways to live a good life, and meditation has been really supportive for me and a lot of people I work with. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the one for you. I just hope that you can keep a curiosity around your internal world and know that you know, if we are disconnected from ourselves for prolonged periods of time, it can be really easy to just get caught in the motions of life, other people's agendas, other people's ideas of who we should be and what we should be. And if there's one thing I'm pretty sure of, it's that the further disconnected we get from ourselves, the more unhappiness we end up having. And the more we kind of go on with our life and feel like, wow, I wasn't really there for it. So I wish you well. If you have any questions, you can send them to me on Instagram. I'll try to respond. And thanks for your time, and thank you for your practice and your presence. Hope to meet some of you in person one day.